Welcome, everyone. I'm Stephanie Shine, the mayor for the city of West Hollywood. I want to thank you all for being here with us today on a very, very important day. Our signs here say, I am a voice in a global effort to end violence against women. V-Day, until violence stops, West Hollywood rises. Today is an important day to acknowledge how far we've come in the fight to stop violence against women and girls, and including gender expansive folks as well, and transgender women and girls and non-binary folks. And it's also important to acknowledge how far we have to go, because our all women and our transgender community, non-binary community, queer community are under attack like never before. And it is more than ever important that we speak up and use our voice all the time that we can, and making sure we're using our voice authentically and representing the truth of our experiences. I want to give a big shout out to my feminist sister, who is now on the County Board of Supervisors, Lindsay Horvath, who always shows up for women and our transgender and gender expansive and LGBTQ community as well. Thank you for the work you've done in this field, and we appreciate you. I also want to acknowledge Declan Floyd, who's here from Senator Portantino's office. Thank you for being here. And I want to acknowledge our Women's Advisory Board, who has made this day possible. Thank you to Chair Keely Field. I know this has been a strong passion of yours, and thank you for your advocacy on the Women's Advisory Board and your fight for women and feminism that you have had lifelong. You are so appreciated, and we appreciate you. And thank you for the service you've given to the city of West Hollywood. And thank you to Renee as well, who have been this fight to eradicate domestic violence and bring awareness. So thank you so much. It is essential for each and every one of us to be aware of where we are, visualize where we want to be, and know what it takes for us to get to where we want to be, which is freedom, safety for all women and members of all communities that experience violence. Women and non-binary, transgender folks, gender expansive folks, and also bisexual women experience, and girls experience an extraordinary amount of violence. And if we all get up here and share our stories, I'm sure it will be very moving and very difficult to do. So the best thing we can do in our lives is to keep helping each other, stand with each other, help each other rise, and put our differences aside and help lift each other up every single day. And so I'm dedicated to doing that over and over again. And the city of West Hollywood has, since its inception, valued and been a strong feminist city, and more than ever, we will stand up against violence of all forms, especially on V-Day, and that's very important, and we value all of you for being here and supporting this as well. I want to now call my colleague, Councilmember Meister, up to give a few words. Appreciate all of you.
Thank you so much, and I just want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank Women's Advisory Board, Renee, MJ, and also our wonderful staff, Larissa and Jasmine, for putting this all together. These events are extremely important, and I know we do them every year, and you kind of wonder, what are we going to do differently this year? But what it does is it raises awareness, which is the first step. Secondly, it educates. And third, it's a step towards changing the culture. And that is the most difficult piece of this puzzle, right, is changing culture. So I'm so glad that you have all joined us, and now I'm going to introduce Councilmember Chelsea Myers.
Good afternoon. It's really lovely to be with you all. 25 years of V-Day. 25 years of this movement fueled by joy and community and a courageous and righteous mission to end violence against women and all people. It's such an honor to be with you all. I'm Chelsea Myers, the newly elected council member here in West Hollywood. I've been a part of many of V-Day events here in West Hollywood and beyond, and I'm really proud that our city is such an ardent and firm supporter of V-Day and this work to end violence. Because we are the city of West Hollywood, we know we have a responsibility to think big and to think inclusively. So I'm going to task us all with some of that today. The work to end violence against women has to be broad and intersectional. So let us not forget that this fight to end violence must include women who are further marginalized than myself in this white body I stand in here. Trans women, non-binary women, women of color, women who are unhoused, women who are in recovery or living with addiction, and so many more. Let this 25th anniversary of V-Day be a moment to stop ourselves and think about who we are leaving out of this conversation, who we haven't seen yet represented in this conversation, and what we can all do to bring them in. Thank you to the lab, to city staff, and to everyone for making this program possible, especially the phenomenal group of speakers who you're all going to hear from today. And thanks for letting me have a few minutes with you before it all kicks off. Without further ado. Amazing, I'm so sorry. Without further ado, your supervisor, Lindsay
honored because I love being in West Hollywood, but even before people knew my relationship with this amazing city, hopefully we all met each other through this work in V-Day, a global movement to end violence against women and girls, because unfortunately we know 1 in 3 women in her lifetime will be raped, beaten, or assaulted. We know that 1 in 5 women in the United States is sexually assaulted annually, these are the annual statistics that keep coming out. And we have to step up, work harder, and do better. And I know that the city has taken on such important work, led by so many of you here, to eradicate violence in all its forms. We've seen it manifest in so many different ways, especially on the national level. We have seen an assault on women's reproductive rights. We know, unfortunately, more attacks are coming through the court system, and so as a pro-choice city, I know West Hollywood will continue to lead our county and our region. I know that the people of West Hollywood are dedicated to making sure that this is not just a day of remembrance, but a day of action and a year of action, stepping up and putting into action the words that we say, the values that we preach, and making sure that we live by them each and every day. So I'm incredibly grateful to the council in West Hollywood, to the commissions and advisory board members, and of course to everyone in the city who takes this issue seriously. I am so thrilled to see who's here to speak today. When I saw online the lineup of speakers and all who are engaged in today's event, I was thrilled because this day, this moment, and this movement is so incredibly important, and to hear the voices who will speak out today will not just begin to change, once again, as Councilmember Meister said, our culture, but start right here in our own community. So thank you very much for welcoming me so warmly, and for continuing this amazing tradition of V-Day. It's been a wonderful honor to be part of V-Day and the 1 Million Rising movement, and I know so many of you have joined in that over the years, and the fight continues. Thank you.
eliminate violence against girls and women is a marathon, and so we are celebrating these milestones as they come up. So thank you so much to the City of West Hollywood and to Larissa, Renee, and the other event organizers. I will start my very brief remarks today with a poem from Arpita Nima. Just when you thought I would shed my leaves, I blossomed. We are here today because millions of survivors of domestic and sexual violence decided to turn their pain into power. They decided to transform their trauma into triumph. And as you know, V-Day is a global movement, an activist movement that has raised over $100 million and has reached over 2 billion people at this point with messaging. But violence against women remains one of the most pressing issues of our time. It's one of the least prosecuted crimes, and it's also the one with the greatest threat to global peace and progress if you look at long-term data. Today, 1 in 3 girls and women will experience violence, and in some countries, the rate is as high as 70%. So when we talk about this, we have to think about one of the intersections as being region. 1 in 3 girls in developing countries are married as child brides, and child marriage is currently legal in 43 states in the United States. Upwards of 50,000 girls and women are trafficked, most sexually trafficked in the United States, and that number is over 21 million on an annual basis globally. Rape is a common practice of war, and horrific stories of sexual violence are being reported daily in Ukraine. 1 in 5 girls and women in the United States will experience sexual assault or rape, and BIPOC women experience much higher rates of violence than white women. And it's important to note, especially Native and Indigenous women are facing the highest rates of sexual violence in the United States, with 1 in 2 facing it over the course of her lifetime. And a vast majority of sexual violence and domestic violence survivors face their first assault before the age of 18. And transgender youth face the highest rates of sexual violence of any youth group. So this is a global problem. We've recognized this. We have to fight it regionally through transnational organizing that takes into account how race, class, ability, and other systems of power intersect with gender-based violence. But I'm happy to report that the tides are shifting. And one of the reasons that we are seeing such a shift is because of the V-Day movement. A recent study of 26 countries finds that people are significantly more likely today than a decade ago to recognize and reject intimate partner violence as being a normal part of life. So the work of V-Day has obviously been a driving force behind this. I want to get personal very briefly. I encountered the vagina monologues. That was my entree into the V-Day movement. For how many of you was a vagina? Yes, we can make some noise over that. How many of you have been involved in a performance of the vagina monologues? Yes. I encountered it for the first time as a college student, going to college very young. I was sheltered. I was homeschooled. I was coming from a Pentecostal evangelical upbringing. And I was absolutely floored by the audacity of women speaking so truthfully about sexuality and about sexual violence. V-Day performances have had a profound effect on multiple generations of women who have participated in this powerful play. And I will say simply that the Vagina Monologues was a click moment for me. It changed my life. I participated in it many times. I produced it many times as a college professor. But the performance that stands out the most to me is not one that I was directly involved in. It happened in post-Katrina New Orleans in 2006. I had just co-founded the New Orleans Women's and Children's Shelter, and we were operating in a horrific disaster zone with elevated rates of domestic violence, and our residents were suffering from multiple compound traumas. The V-Day organization reached out to me to see if any of the residents in our shelter would like to perform the Vagina Monologues at Tulane University. And 5 of our residents from our shelter took the stage. They were transformed by the process, by the humanization of finding a space where they were able to speak their truth and find their voice. So not only did V-Day uplift and empower these survivors, they went on and in their communities were able to bring the message to others. 2 of them directed the Vagina Monologues, and and other settings. And this is the ripple effect of this global movement. Also, the V-Day organization sent an unsolicited check, which kept our shelter open. I don't think they know this. I don't think they understood that the significance of their donation, that it was literally the difference between closing our doors and keeping them open. I think sometimes when we look at the global impact and the stats, it might overshadow the fact that V-Day has very real effects in the lives of very real women and girls. And I don't know about you, but I want to live in the world that V-Day is creating through badass global organizing. I want to live in the world that Tarana Burke is creating, that Lily Bernard and Ivan Bottini, Amanda Wynn, Evan Rachel Wood, Jennifer Siebel Newsom. I want to live in the world that they are creating by using their voices and using their platforms for activism. And I'll wrap up with an Audre Lorde quote and a quick response to it. As Audre Lorde put it, "Revolution is not a one-time event. My silences have not protected me. Your silence will not protect you. But for every word spoken, for every attempt I've ever made to speak those truths for which I am seeking, I have made contact with other women, bridging our differences. Only women revolting can collectively stop rape." So I close with a very heartfelt thank you to V-Day for leading this revolution for a world that is free of violence against girls and women. Thank you.
Next, we have Queen Chela Demuir, President of the Unique Women's Coalition.
Good day, everyone, and thank you for having us and everyone who made this event happen today. You rock. Before I begin, I just want to bring my transcestors into this space. I am Queen Chela, and I am the founder of Unique Women's Coalition, the oldest trans-led service provider in Southern California. Being a pioneer, I've seen the evolution of trans existence over the past 3 decades through the dedicated service to my community. Unique Women's Coalition is dedicated to being a collective voice for Black trans culture. Our efforts are centered around elevating and ensuring that our community has equitable access to all resources, which aid in achieving our goals, like every human should. As such, it's important that a trans woman, that we're included in this conversation, as our community is disproportionately impacted by violence each year. This violence looks different for each of us. Violence by the very systems created to protect us. Violence by those who say they love us. And lastly, violence by those who can't stand our existence. Historically, Black trans women have been murdered at astronomical rates in this country. November 20th is set aside as International Transgender Day of Remembrance, where we pay homage to the siblings we lose to transphobia. Each year, Black trans women have been at the top of this list for over a decade. Last year, we recorded 38 murders. And in 2021, there was a record high of 50 murders of trans people. Among these devastating statistics, trans women of color continue to account for the majority. Today, we're in the month of February. It's Black History Month, and we have already lost 5 siblings due to transphobia behavior, all of whom were Black trans women. With this reality in mind, today is an opportunity to make you an ally in the fight against the violence that impacts all women. And if you're already an ally, maybe it's time we get you to clock in as an accomplice. Because together we can move this conversation forward, we can move the needle. Our way through is founded in how we show up for each other, sharing access to resource, leveraging our privileges, and providing more intersectional platforms to elevate our messages, as simplified here today. When we find ways to connect with each other as humans, it is then and only then do we start to have a human experience. That's the point when we could really start the work. Before being a community leader, I am a mother figure to many. And this violence directly impacts me and the work that I do. Every single one of my daughters, my sisters, and siblings deserve a life of civility, respect, and dignity. We shouldn't have our lives shortened just because people refuse to see us as human beings. And in closing, I leave you with this. Silence is violence. When we don't say something, it perpetuates the cycle of suffering. Not for one, but for all. Just want to leave you with one last thing. It has to be a we thing. It has to be an us thing in order for us to really get things done. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Keely Field, Chair of the City of West Hollywood Women's Advisory Board, Feminist and LGBTQ plus activist.
How long have you guys been together?
I live alone, but thanks for asking. Happily live alone. I want to thank everyone for coming here today. I'm glad that we have days of the year and months of the year where we commemorate survivors of domestic violence and also victims. But let me tell you, this is a 24/7 issue. Okay? 1 in 3 girls is a victim of physical, emotional, and verbal abuse from a dating partner. 1 in 4 women and 2 out of every 4 LGBTQ people, and even 1 in 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their life. 2/3 of elder abuse and neglect cases, the abuser is a family member, adult children or spouse. So what do these numbers tell us? We all likely know or will know someone who is directly impacted by abuse and domestic violence. To feel comfortable stepping up and responding appropriately, it is very crucial to be able to recognize the signs. Abuse can be physical, emotional, verbal, sexual, psychological, financial, digital, and even resource restricted. But it is a fact that all types of abuse have a commonality: power and control. The cycle of violence has a physical, emotional, and verbal abuse component, but it's difficult for any victim to leave their abuser because they have been living in fear or have had threats made against their own lives if they report the abuse in any way. This type of behavior feeds into what we call learned helplessness. What are the 3 steps in the cycle of violence? Let me tell you, first is the tension building phase. In this phase, the batterer gets edgy and begins to build up with tension over time. Second is the actual explosion phase where the physical abuse occurs. It can last from a few minutes to several hours. Third is the honeymoon phase, the gift giving, the apologies that I'm always going to be here for you. I want to employ everyone here today, and anyone who sees a recording of this today, to act on the 3 R's. This is actually taught in the military as well. But let me tell you, the 3 R's, I think, are not something that the general public are always aware of. The 3 R's of domestic violence awareness are recognize, respond, and refer. Every single human has an ability to do that, no matter age, gender identity, or socioeconomic background. You have to listen to the person and express your concern, but you want to refer help for the victim, but lead that to them. You have to lead them to that help. One way to do that is to call the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is 24/7. That is 1-800-799-SAFE. I also want to take you inside the shoes of a survivor. I had the honor of meeting Kirby Banks. She resides in central Louisiana, and I want to read her account in first-hand person so you can just get a feel for what it's like to be in someone's shoes who's being abused. I met someone in high school when we started dating. I fell pregnant 3 months before graduating and moved in with him. The first time he put his hands on me was while I was pregnant. I wanted my daughter to have a father, so I stayed with him. The violence progressed. It was sexual, physical, and emotional abuse. No one knew what was going on behind closed doors. He treated me like I was his property. I got my first restraining order after he showed up at my apartment, threw me around, and choked me. I got another restraining order 4 years later, but then I ended up dropping it because I didn't have anyone to represent me in court, had no funds, and I was afraid of his daily threats. The police treated me like a delusional, hysterical, uncooperative person, to use their words, anytime I went to them for help. In June 2017, I woke up to him sexually assaulting me in my bed. I stood up for myself and told him that what he was doing was rape. He told me he would show me what it was really like to be raped. He threw me onto the bed. I swung at him and bit him hard. He got back on top of me and started strangling me. My daughter came in and yelled at him to stop. I was able to call the police. Once again, they treated me like a delusional, hysterical, uncooperative person because I didn't want to repeat everything I had already said to them 4 times in a row in the same police department and in front of different men. The police report says I refused to write a statement, but I was never asked to do so. They told me I needed to decide if I wanted to press charges of breaking and entering, or if I wanted them to call whoever does rape kits. And that's literally how they use the word, whoever does rape kits. They didn't tell me who did. One police officer talked to my daughter, then told me my husband was being arrested for domestic abuse and battery by strangulation based on what she had just said to him. They told me, just sign this paper, ma'am. I'm done handling you with kid gloves. Let's go. I met with my counselor, and next thing, I have Child Protective Services called on me for allowing my children to see spousal abuse. I was instructed to get a protective order for me and the kids. At the hearing, he was granted supervised visitation and required to take 26 weeks of family violence intervention classes. He was arrested 4 times while he was taking the classes, but he still got a certificate. After that, he decided to file for sole custody of our children. The closer it gets to trial, the more I fear that he will kill me and my kids and flee to another country. He used to have an AK-47 and a Glock, always loaded. I don't know if he surrendered his guns. Police never indicated that to me. I always felt he was probably just hiding them in his garage. Yet I was determined to fight him every step of the way. I co-founded a group called Voices of Canadiana, an organization which advocates for victims of domestic violence. When this women's abuse group was started at the Bayou Church in Louisiana, that is where I broke my silence for the first time. Now I'm a trained facilitator. I spoke in front of a group of 150 women and shared my story of domestic abuse. It was an incredible feeling when these women stood up and clapped for me. They were also survivors themselves. It made me feel as though my chains were broken. I believe there are millions that can relate to Kirby's story, and I wanted us to be in her shoes for a moment, just to see what these people go through. And Kirby, I commend you, and her organization is Faith House Acadiana, ACADINA.com. I also want to also give recognition to how the Silent Witness National Initiative began, which leads us to our incredible silhouettes. In 1990, an ad hoc group of women, artists and writers, upset about the growing number of women in Minnesota being murdered by their partners and acquaintances, joined together with several other women's organizations to form the Arts Action Against Domestic Violence. These compassionate women felt an urgency to do something that would speak out against escalating domestic violence in their own state. They set out to create something that would commemorate the lives of the 26 women whose lives had been lost in 1990 as a result of domestic violence. After much brainstorming, the woman began to design 26 freestanding life-size red wooden figures, each one bearing the name of a woman who once lived, worked, had neighbors, friends, colleagues, family, children, all whose lives ended violently at the hands of a partner, husband, boyfriend, lover, or even an acquaintance. A 27th figure was added to represent those unaccounted women, LGBTQ people, seniors, and men whose murders went unsolved or were erroneously ruled accidental. The organizers called the figures the silent witness, the original 27 witnesses. On February 18, 1991, more than 500 women met at a church across the street from the Minnesota State Capitol to showcase with these newly constructed witnesses lined up at the front of the sanctuary. The women formed a silent procession escorting the figures in single file across the street, up the steps and into the state capitol were intended for public viewing, as statements about the tragedy of how each of their lives had ended. The sheer volume of space the figures occupied spoke of their power and the loss. That is when the silent witness exhibit was officially launched. And inspired by the impact of the exhibit on many lives, and supporters came together with Jane Seller in 1994 with the determination to create a larger goal, namely the formation of a national initiative dedicated to the elimination of domestic murders. It was then that a 5-part process model evolved, starting with the creation of the Silent Witnesses exhibits in all 50 states in our nation. Within 1 year, a total of 800 silent witnesses had been created, representing women, LGBTQ people, men, and even seniors who were killed as a result of domestic violence in 17 states. Today, many states and countries are now involved. Silent Witness has been instrumental in the discovery and promotion of successful domestic violence reduction projects. The original 27 women whose murders prompted the passion to create the Silent Witness Initiative have prevailed. And I'm very, very honored that West Hollywood is now going to be one of those cities. And I can tell you this. One of the ways that we break the stigma is what we see and what we hear and what we know. And there are going to be people that walk down the sidewalks of West Hollywood. There's going to be residents, there's going to be visitors, there's going to be people of all age, all gender identities. When they see these, it's not only voice, but it breaks the stigma. These have literally been put in school campuses. I'm talking Mississippi. It doesn't matter if it's a blue state or a red state. Children have come up and literally told their teachers about domestic violence happening at home because they've seen the silent witness silhouettes. And it makes them unafraid because they see they're not alone. They're not the only one. And that is the power of these. And I just want to thank the city and the council and the Women's Advisory Board, and it's just an honor, and I'm telling you, these can actually help save lives. Thank you.
Next up, we have Renee Sotile, 2-time Emmy award-winning video journalist and documentary filmmaker, activist citizen, and creator of the award-winning call to action music video, I Remember Nicole, a global anthem reclaiming power over domestic violence.
Okay, so before we left today, Mary Jo said, well, if you bomb, at least you're in the room with all your sheroes, so thank you, everyone. Yeah, this is rough. Learning of the silent witness silhouettes that honor those murdered from domestic violence moved me in a deep way. So thank you, Keely, for partnering with me on the proposal, the Women's Advisory Board for supporting it, Council for approving it, and of course Larissa for making it all come together. Today I am honoring 3 women with a silent witness silhouette. Iana Casillan, 30 years old, tortured, scalped, and drained of her blood by her boyfriend inside their West Hollywood condo in 2016. She had given birth to the baby girl just 3 weeks earlier. Her life is in danger, her mother pleads with a 911 call. It took several days for our sheriffs to agree that something was wrong at the game entrance. Amy Harwick, 38 years old. She had a thriving family practice in West Hollywood. An ex-boyfriend stalked her, broke into her home in the Hollywood Hills, strangled her, and threw her over her third-floor balcony. Her trial is pending, and his next court date is actually scheduled for this Tuesday. I joined Carolyn and other brave women at the Harvey Weinstein sentencing last week. Perhaps we can return downtown to support justice for Amy Harwick. Third, Nicole Brown Simpson, 36, when she was murdered outside her home in Brentwood, just a few miles west of here. Working as a video journalist, I covered the O.J. Simpson trial of the century that lasted for months. News media from all over the world and hundreds gathered outside day after day. In the beginning, there were no barriers, no yellow tape lining the steps of the criminal courthouse attorneys took to enter the front door. It was a complete free-for-all, often called a media circus. The trial put domestic violence in the national spotlight, but as it went on, I saw how her black and blue photos and 911 calls in Nicole's own voice became less and less significant. People either didn't understand domestic abuse, didn't care, or didn't believe it. I saw the shift from sympathy to victim blaming, a harsh reality I wasn't aware of and found disturbing. This began my activism for domestic violence awareness. To backtrack a minute, before O.J. was taken into custody, we were outside his mansion off Sunset Boulevard. Lots of media and even fans trying to catch a glimpse of him. He did come out, and I ended up near him as he was posing for pictures. He grabbed me, thinking I wanted one, and pulled me close. I could feel his whole body next to me. A lady actually snapped a picture. Marriager was there in the distance, and she saw what was happening and yelled something like, "Get away from her." Yeah, get in the car. And I actually had a nightmare that night, my first time. Of all the horrific things I've seen working in news, I got a nightmare that night. Back to the trial, to an image that is imprinted in my mind. I was in the courthouse waiting for the elevator when the door opens and there's Nicole's family. Mom, Dad, Tanya, and Denise Brown. They were quiet with a look of shock on their faces, complete pain and heartbreak. Fast forward to the Me Too movement and the rise of the women's movement. Thank you, Emmy. Mary Jo and I often talk about creating a song and music video to empower, to start conversations about intimate partner violence, and to remember Nicole and all the Nicoles. We are thankful to the City of West Hollywood for sponsoring I Remember Nicole. It is currently on Amazon Prime, YouTube, and other streaming platforms, so we hope you watch and share. My own niece, Kim, who I'm really close with, never shared with me or anyone until I Remember Nicole that she was in an abusive relationship. She did leave him, but they share a daughter, so his presence is a constant reminder. But I am grateful now that she no longer feels she has to be silent. As Mary Jo likes to say, we're raising awareness, we're raising the roof. Thank you.
Next we have Macias, CEO and founder, California Families in Focus.
Thank you all for being here. So there I was, trembling, scared, and confused. I just left my abuser for the 7th time. This time it was different. This time, the stakes were higher. This time, his rage had migrated to my daughters, and I was forced to think about my decision and the consequences. If I take the red pill, I go back. Things will be good for a brief period of time. Then the mental, emotional, physical, financial, spiritual, and sexual torture will begin. And it will be 7 times worse. And I will continue to perpetuate the generational trauma that has plagued the women of my maternal bloodline for 7 generations. Worst case scenario, scenario, death, caused by the person who promised to love and protect me till death do us part, which at this point seemed to be lurking around the corner. Or I take the blue pill. I can be brave, bold, and fearless, and change the trajectory of my life by breaking the generational curse so that I can give my 4 daughters a new lease on life and avoid a lifetime of therapy, self-harm, and self-destructive behavior. Worst case scenario, life, caused by the only person who can truly love me and care for me, myself. And so, as I looked in the back of my minivan, and as I saw my daughters huddled together in tears, I decided to take the blue pill. And that day, I not only took what I could fit in my minivan, I also took 3 of the most important things in the world to me that day. My daughters, my dignity, my life. And by making that decision that day, I released my ancestors from their perpetual spiritual shackles, and I honored my maternal bloodline 7 generations back. Since then, I took my power back, and I vowed to educate, inspire, and empower women and girls around the world any chance I got. And so, here I am today. Even though I'm crying, I'm not bitter. I'm not
Go ahead and cry, it's good.
It's good, right? It's a release. I'm not bitter for that part of my history. I'm better because of it. I acknowledge and extract the life lessons of that experience, and I am now on a journey to self-healing and on a journey to create a women's healing retreat center in Mexico. A healing retreat center dedicated to help heal generational and ancestral trauma and to empower women and girls. My call to action today is for women and girls around the world to know their worth, to find their strength and their life's purpose, and to step into their light, to be the light, and to share their light. And for politicians and religious leaders around the world to be unapologetic trailblazers who protect and advocate for the well-being of all women, straight, gay, but especially for trans women of color. Because we vote, we shop, and we all matter. So to give power and purpose to my call to action today, I will count to 3, and together we will say in the Native American language the word aho, which means that you agree with me, and so shall it be, and so it is. So 1, 2, 3. Aho! Thank you so much. Thank you, NJ. Thank you, Renee Sotile. Thank you to the City of West Hollywood. I have always been a fan. I actually volunteered for many years for the Pride Parade, and I was one of the coordinators that kept everybody safe. Everybody that would step in, everybody that was drunk from the previous day or that morning. My team and I were the ones saying, "Excuse me, you need to wait a little bit. There's people, there's cars coming through here." So this is not my first event with the City of West Hollywood. I have been blessed and honored to participate for many, many years. So thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share my journey and for giving me this amazing platform. And may we all continue to inspire, educate, and empower women around the world.
And next we have Emiliana Guereca, founder and president of the Women's March Foundation.
I am a full-time feminist, as most of you see on my Instagram, and I wrote a little speech, but I'm truly inspired by everyone that has been up here really being authentic in what has happened to us and how we continue to move forward. As many of you know, I'm one of 13 kids. I am the 7th child, 7 girls and 5 boys. And when we talk about violence against women, I want to make sure that we also touch on some of the roots of it. And when we talk about sexism, when we talk about poverty, and currently reproductive rights, those are all things that lead to violence against women. Every single person in this room knows of someone that has experienced violence against another woman or themselves. And so one of the key things is to recognize it. But the second thing is to listen, trust, and empower that woman to take charge. And some of the questions, I grew up in a very violent home. And one of the big questions that was always asked of my mom is, why didn't you leave? No one ever asked him, why didn't he stop? Why didn't he stop? Right, so I think part of it is that for us is to really trust women and empower them, to listen to them, because they may not be ready to leave, right? But the other piece is to help them break that generational trauma, break that chain that makes it okay for someone to abuse them verbally, physically, sexually, emotionally. And that is one of the key things. So out of 7 sisters, all of us begged Mom to leave, because this was unsafe for everyone. Unsafe for everyone. But then, I was 16 at the time. Why does she need to leave? Kick him out. Kick him out. At that point was the point where Mom gathered the strength, because now she had all of the girls, 7 of us, saying, we will help you. She kicked him out. Because it takes all of us, it takes an entire community to help listen, trust, and empower that woman to take charge. And it may not look like taking charge to us, but it is for her. Right? So that is the key. And when we talk about policies, we need to talk about policies that educate and empower women and give them resources. Give them resources to do whatever it is that they need to do to move on. And that is what we're missing here.
Yeah.
That is what we're missing here. And so when we talk about, most people think, well, violence against women is just A, B, C. We all have a bias as to what we think. If you close your eyes, what does it look like? Probably something we've experienced. But we also have to be able to say, that may not be what I do, but we're going to trust that she can do it. And today in this world, the other piece is social media. Violence against women also involves body shaming. Also involves forcing women to have kids that they do not want or can provide for. So we have to push back on the narrative that it's women who need to walk away. It is society that must protect them. It is society that must provide resources because women are always asked to do more with less. We are asked to volunteer for PTA, right? We are asked to do more while we're not equal yet. So I'm going to ask you, wherever you are in your life's journey, to recognize it, to recognize violence against women in the workplace, whether it is by sexual harassment, unequal pay is violence against women.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? No health insurance is violence against women. Poverty is violence against women. When a society does not see women as equals, that is violence against women. Recognize it. Trust that you can push back. Ask, how are you protecting women in this company? How are you protecting women and empowering them to live their best lives? Because that is all we want. So, with that, I, with Women's March Foundation, womensmarchfoundation.org, is asking you to nominate a woman for the month of March. And I'm asking you to nominate every single woman that you know. They will receive a certificate that says you are valued. You are worthy. No matter where they are in the country, I'm going to ask you to nominate as many women as possible. In 2018, we sent 500 certificates. Okay? So, women are worthy, trust them, and empower them to move forward with their best lives. Thank you. Take them to the curb.
And our final speaker of the day is Kamala Lopez, President and founder of Equal Means Equal.
My name is Kamala Lopez. I'm the president of the national nonprofit Equal Means Equal, which has been focused on the ratification and adoption of the original Equal Rights Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. This amendment stalled in 1982 due to a misunderstanding surrounding a purported deadline, which was placed in the preamble of the amendment. This illegal deadline that was not voted on by the states violated the balance of power between Congress, the executive branch, and the states, and has been declared illegal by constitutional scholars, including the president of the American Constitution Society, former Senator Russ Feingold, as well as Harvard Law School's Lawrence Tribe, and 22 state attorneys general who wrote a joint letter affirming the validity of the ERA and urging publication. This deadline is a red herring. It's also a calculated tool being used to misinform and confuse feminist activists. In fact, when the 27th Amendment, which gave Congress the right to give themselves pay raises, was ratified in 1994, it was after 203 years. It was written by James Madison, for God's sakes. And that was when activists realized that the demise of the ERA was a bait and switch, and that in fact, all that was needed to complete was 3 additional states. That's when the 3-state strategy was born. In 2009, we started organizing and educating, and in 2016, we released our documentary, Equal Means Equal, and partnered with organizations across the country to re-educate the public on the need for constitutional equality for all persons, regardless of sex. I'm proud to say that over the following 4 years, Equal Means Equal and our allies, which included the city of West Hollywood, organized, mobilized, and activated women in the 22 unratified states to pick up the fight again. and we succeeded. In 2017, Nevada became the first state to ratify since 1978. Then Illinois followed the next year. And finally, after a very bitter battle, we succeeded in Virginia in 2020. This completed the ratification process. Why is this relevant to the conversation we're having today? What does the publication, adoption, and enforcement of the ERA have to do with violence, and in particular, gendered violence? Well, we're all aware of the dramatic rise of violence against women and girls across all demographics. And as we've seen of late, no sector of our community is safe from the attack, both literal and legislative. This gendered violence is so normalized and so often internalized that it is often difficult to convince the average American that it is a serious problem. The fact is, as many of you have stated, by the time they turn 13, 70% of girls in this country will have already experienced sexual harassment. And by the time they are 18, that will have escalated to assault for 1 in 3 of them. The reality, despite the propaganda of female empowerment and the ubiquity of corporate feminism, the United Nations reported that the United States of America is the 3rd most dangerous country in the world for sexual violence, tied with Syria. It is why the #1 cause of death in pregnant women is homicide. And I believe it is one of the main reasons that the Equal Rights Amendment remains unpublished today, now over 3 years after completing full ratification. As a society, we don't just send the message that females are inferior, it was literally written into our laws. Inequality is the air we breathe. The Equal Rights Amendment is the single greatest weapon we have, not just to defend ourselves from gendered violence, but to finally achieve the equal protection of our laws. The truth is, despite the highly orchestrated misinformation campaign surrounding the purported expired deadline, the amendment is fully ratified and it is ready for adoption and enforcement. The only thing standing in our way is the lack of publication, which is a breathtakingly illegal act that violates the simple language of Article 5 of the Constitution, which states very simply, very clearly, upon ratification of 3/4 of the states, the amendment shall be adopted. By interfering with the U.S. Archivist and ordering them not to fulfill their obligation, one that has never been interrupted by the executive branch before in the history of our country, we come face to face with the underlying misogyny that keeps women a full 100 years after its introduction as second-class citizens, unable to fulfill our potential as equals and help mitigate the violence and poverty that is destroying our society. The ERA grants women full personhood, which not only will lift tens of millions of people out of poverty, including most children, but will require equal pay for equal work or work of equal value. We will also no longer be in a class by ourselves when it comes to the protection of our laws. The ERA will put sex in the same category as race and religion, granting women and all persons strict scrutiny under the law when faced with sex or gender discrimination. The present free-for-all sweeping across state legislatures, the violation and rollback of our rights, including those of bodily autonomy and choice, will be stopped dead in their tracks when confronted by constitutionally protected rights granted by ERA. ERA gives everyone the same rights and protections regardless of who they are physically and where they are geographically. These rights cannot be taken away, unfunded, rewritten, or retracted by the bang of a gavel or the stroke of a pen. That is the power of a constitutional amendment, and that is why it has been such a long road to get where we are today. But it's clear that we are at a turning point. Will we permit the U.S. government to illegally withhold basic human rights from over half the population by refusing to publish the ERA? Will we continue to permit 99% of rapists to escape accountability for their actions? Will we turn a blind eye to the abduction and torture of our children who are being trafficked? Will we continue to be robbed of $1.7 trillion a year of our earnings by an intransigent gender pay gap? The answer must be no, and we must act now. When President Biden took office, we were certain, given his public position on the ERA, that he would immediately retract the illegal OLC memo that then Attorney General Bill Barr sent to the U.S. Archivist under direct orders from then President Donald Trump. But sadly, shockingly, Biden did not. In fact, the Biden administration is still fighting the adoption of the ERA in court today, despite his public posture. Few know this, and that is part of why I'm here today. If more people knew that, one, women and our allies achieved ERA on January 27th of 2020, two, that it would save reproductive rights and the bodily autonomy of all persons under the U.S. Constitution, and three, that Biden needs to only pick up the phone and direct the archivist to publish the amendment, our fight would be over. The amendment would be published, states would be compelled to adopt and enforce it, but instead the game has been to keep the truth hidden from the public. More than 80% of whom believe the amendment was ratified in the 70s. We cannot let this happen. Millions of women fought for the ERA since 1923. On this, the centennial year of the ERA's introduction into Congress, we will finally break free, and we will wrestle from this government more than one constitutional right, which is to vote. Otherwise, the backlash from this century of progress will be swept back into the sea of history, like happened to the women in Iran less than half a century ago. Will we allow our children and grandchildren to die clawing back rights that we ourselves legally possess at the moment? Or shall we find a way to make that beautiful mosaic that Alice Paul dreamed of and claim what is rightfully ours, equality, ordinary equality, nothing less. 50 years ago, Phyllis Schlafly stormed the Capitol, armed with homemade bread, a smile, and a big old load of bullshit. And when I leave here tonight, I will be hopping on a red-eye to attend the first Senate hearings on the ERA in 50 years. And make our voices heard demanding publication. So this Tuesday at 10 a.m., the U.S. Senate will hold these hearings. They're scheduled coincidentally at the exact same time as the hearings to confirm the new archivist. It's clear that our government's goal is to kill the Equal Rights Amendment, or at least refuse to adopt it and continue to use it as a political pawn to raise money and votes, which they've been doing since 2020. Their plan is to shove the ERA back into a dark corner until the 2024 election at the cost of thousands of innocent lives. We're not going to let that happen. When the hearings are over, my team will be heading to the Capitol, armed with invitations to the biggest party for equality the world has ever seen, the ERA Centennial on March 22nd. Equal Means Equal is organizing these parties, these centennial parties across the nation, including right here in the great city of West Hollywood. So consider this your official invitation. Let's get the party started. Go to equalmeansequal.org, sign up to host a party in your city or town, and here's to buying new constitutions.
Kamalas, and I love Kamala here today. Thank you so much. I think that we need to do another round of applause for all of our incredible speakers. I know due to weather it'll take more time, but it's an honor to know, with the help of the city, that these silhouettes will actually be living in different areas around the city for many days to come. I truly believe that not only will they help break the stigma, they will help save lives. An incredible woman told us, she's my forever president, that women's rights are human rights. Women hold up half the sky. Women united are stronger than a country divided. And virtue can only flourish among equals. Today, we are all equals, and we empower the voices of everyone that is currently a survivor and that knows a survivor and that is currently in need. We stand with you. The City of West Hollywood stands with you. LGBTQ community and men and women, you are not alone. And every single day, you are not alone. And onward and upward, nevertheless, we persist.